Welcome to The Last 50 Feet, the podcast about what happens when autonomous vehicles actually arrive at the curb. Every week, we get into what is moving in autonomous commerce, what's stalling, and who's building what next. No fluff, all signal, and we keep it brief. That's our thing. Let's get into it.
Welcome to another episode of The Last 50 Feet. The cast of regular characters are here, but we're super excited today to be joined by Ming Maa, co-founder and CEO of Moove. Ming, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. We'd like to kick it off today by just understanding a little bit about you. Can you give us your quick 1 minute high level?
Yeah, sure thing. So I maybe a little bit longer than 1 minute, but I started my career at Goldman in the merchant bank, which is, you can think about it as the private equity arm of Goldman. Did that for about 12 years. Then I followed one of my mentors, Eric, to SoftBank, where I did just a number of Masa's investments. And this was before the Vision Fund was created. Learned just a tremendous amount from Masa, did all of his ride-sharing investments globally in markets like China, India, Southeast Asia. And then ultimately went over to Grab, became president of that business for about 8-9 years. Took it public before retiring and then launching Moove AV.
Fantastic. I feel like most folks go kind of in one direction in their careers, and it's usually from operator to investor, but you went the opposite direction. What informed that pivot for you?
Yeah, I think what is pretty apparent is regardless of whether you're investing or if you're operating, you're still fundamentally solving the same problems, right? The only difference is investors can choose to walk away from a problem or figure out the right people to solve the problems. Whereas on the operating side, you can't, right? You have to find ways to solve them, or you have to find a way to create an opportunity from those problems. So I absolutely love going through that process of just problem solving as a builder. I love building products, love building the right teams to solve a problem. That's what ultimately drove me to leave investing and then focus on the operations.
Yeah, and you chose quite an interesting problem to go and tackle. I think it was 8 countries, and was it 500 cities that you scaled Grab to? Is that correct?
Yeah, all across Southeast Asia. I think about it, everything south of Hong Kong. Massive. It's a very, very diverse region, very different countries, very different demographics. It was a lot of fun building that business across such a diverse set of countries.
What was it like competing with Travis and Uber in those days?
I love a good competitor. Competition. We always think of it as iron sharpens iron. And so having a good competitor helps you really focus around the customer and how to better serve customers relative to some of the other alternatives. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was talking about that with my team as well, that it's so important ultimately to have that type of a dynamic in the market. Adidas and Nike and Volkswagen and BMW. I mean, you need to have Mercedes and BMW for that matter. You have to have that kind of iron sharpens iron dynamic if you're building something on the cutting edge and the frontier, so that ultimately you're building an industry or a category. And I think for us, that's going to be exciting to watch as the years go on. And Autolane today, we're kind of in a sea of our own, I suppose, but that will change, right? And it's going to be good for us, when we get to that point. So I think we've got some questions. I'd love to know a little bit, just for the audience that's not familiar. Can you tell us a little bit about Moove? I know Moove has had a transition from financing in Africa, and now Moove AV, which is the particular part of Moove that you're running. Can you kind of update the audience on the business?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think one of the observations around ride sharing is if you really think about the CVP for ride sharing, the customer value proposition, it really hasn't evolved over the last 10 years. So the customer experience of ordering a ride is largely the same as it was 5-10 years ago. Arguably, I think it's one of the only sectors in tech where it's been price inflationary over time, because the cost of human labor continues to rise faster than inflation. So with that sort of notion in mind, we always knew autonomy was the right way to really reinvent the CVP for riders. And so after going public, I started thinking about what's next in ride sharing. So Moove AV is the world's largest dedicated infrastructure provider for autonomous vehicles. We partner with Waymo. We operate their fleet in Phoenix, Arizona. Amazing city. It's the center of semiconductor fabs, and it's also Waymo's first market back in 2020. We also operate the Waymo fleet in Miami. Amazing city, really gorgeous. One of the largest markets on the East Coast currently. And then we've announced our launch of Waymo in London, the largest market in Europe, and that should happen sometime later this year. And I think the best way to think about our model is we help Waymo light up a city with 0 Waymo FTEs on the ground. So they turn on the Waymo One app, and then we take care of everything else, from developing the infrastructure to running the end-to-end fleet operations for Waymo.
It's incredible. Out of all of the things that you guys do on the ground when you light that city up, what is the most, at least from what you can share, what is the most intensive part of that process?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to really pick one, but I think if I sort of step back for a second, when you think about managing an AV fleet, it's very, very different from managing a traditional fleet of vehicles. When you think about traditional fleet companies, their objective is just BIS, right? It's butts and seats. You spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of energy looking for drivers. And then when you find a driver, you want to get a car out of your parking lot as soon as possible. And then you just completely forget about that car until it comes back. So it's very, very hands-off. Managing an AV fleet is almost the exact opposite. So the first thing we do is we have to really develop and really create the infrastructure to support ride-sharing services. So a mid-tier market like Phoenix may have something around 40 megawatts of power total across multiple different infrastructure sites. Some of these are outdoors, some of these are indoors. Every facility has a different set of SOPs and functions that are attached to that infrastructure. And going from 0 to operational, lights on can take anything from 12 to 18 months, and that's really the long pole in the tent, if you will. Now, once that infrastructure is up, then we spend 0% of our time thinking about filling seats or filling drivers. Instead, we think a lot about really understanding the demand curve for ride sharing. So, how does the rider demand change throughout the day, and then how do you, as best as possible, match the supply curve of your vehicles to the rider demand curve, just as best as possible. Now, today, I think Waymo has very, very good, very sophisticated tools for managing these supply and demand curves. But what we find is every city is very unique in different ways. So we really help fine tune that system for every city. If you want to borrow just an analogy from AI. So for example, when really bad weather hits a city, right, we have to think about how do you safely defleet all the vehicles, bring them back to the facilities. And then once it's ready for ride sharing again, how do you then gracefully manage that supply curve back up so that you bring ride sharing services back up? So there's a lot of activities in managing an AV fleet when operations are running at nominal. So everything from charging, cleaning, servicing, maintenance, all of that, and that's BAU. Those are very important processes, and they're really table stakes, they're hygiene. But where we spend a lot of time and a lot of the challenges is thinking about how to run the fleet when things are off nominal.
That's fascinating. I mean, we're here at Autolane getting our proverbial feet wet with an initial fleet that is running on our platform in Austin, Texas, actually starting today. And all of the things that you mentioned, are question marks that we've had to answer, or our partners have had to answer. And it's to your point, it's it is a 24/7 operation. Yes, it is more precise. Yes, it's automated. It gives you more control, but it also means, you got a 24/7 telemetry stream. You can see each one of the tires across the entire fleet. It's PSI. You can see, battery consumption, all of that, in real time, which in a lot of ways makes it easier and more controllable. But to your point, in a lot of ways, it also makes it much more difficult because you're responsible second by second of every one of those cars that are on the road. Unlike with a human driver, that human is taking responsibility from the time that they leave the facility to the time they come back. So we're seeing some of those questions and answers coming through our platform as well, which has been interesting.
You've mentioned before that you think one of the big, or at least the next big moats in AVs is fleet and fleet infrastructure and management. Most people hear moat and they think software. Walk us through what you mean by kind of the moat in fleet and maybe where it's underestimated.
Yeah. So I think this is, there's a lot of different components to thinking about this, but with autonomy, I think one of the keys to start framing the conversation is really around what is the total cost to provide ride-sharing services over the full life of the vehicle. So call it 5 years plus. So think about all of the infrastructure costs, the insurance, the maintenance, charging, cleaning, people, parts. When you look at the 5-year TCS for autonomy, what you really start to realize is the cost of the car itself. It's actually just generally somewhere between 30 to 40% of the total TCS. And obviously, as volumes go up, scale manufacturing gets better and better. The total cost will come down over time. Now, what that means, though, is the majority of the cost related to commercializing AVs, that's in the day-to-day operations. It's the fleet management, it's the infrastructure, it's the charging, it's the technicians. And that's why we think fleet operations, it's just such a critical part of scaling autonomy. But importantly, it's important to get it right, because unless that 60 to 70% of the TCS is done sustainably, then the overall ecosystem isn't necessarily sustainable. So just to give you an example, one of the things that we think about a lot is really how to maximize the uptime of the entire fleet. And we think about this at two different levels, right? The first being at the vehicle level, and the second is at the fleet or the market level. At the vehicle level, the constraints are pretty simple. It's just the physics, right? It's the amount of time that it takes to charge a vehicle and all of the other workflows that you have to perform, whether it's cleaning, whether it's all of the software updates, all of that should be optimized to fit within the charging window. And of course, as the charging windows shrink, because either the batteries get bigger, chargers get faster, then all the other workflows have to shrink alongside that. So that's very, very basic and table stakes. But when you sort of zoom out to the fleet level, that's where it gets a lot more interesting. In any market, we'll have 4 to 5 different facilities really situated around different parts of the city. Again, each facility will have different capabilities, different workflows. And when you're operating a fleet at scale, then it's about how do you orchestrate all of these facilities to really operate together as one mesh network. And that's what determines your utilization at the fleet level. So the problems that we think about are, where do you route cars to for different workflows? How do you load balance? One way to think about it is how do you load balance the total supply of electrons, right, which is all of your charging infrastructure, with your total demand for electrons over the course of the day. That's rider demand. And it's that orchestration software layer that we're building.
Super interesting. What has surprised you maybe the most in getting these cities lit up? What has been something that you didn't believe was going to be the case?
Well, it's really around ultimately, how do you provide the safest ride-sharing service to consumers? And all of the workflows that are involved in that can be very, very complicated. I sort of think about just going back to my days at Grab. One of the things that we've learned in ride-sharing is ride-sharing companies tend to be much more about the on-ground operations as they are about the technology, the platform, the marketplace. And when you're operating in as many different markets as Grab is operating, you mentioned 500 cities, there's probably more by now. What you very quickly learn is every market's different. And then how do you become as intentionally hyper-local in your operations? That's what really makes a huge difference in the customer experience and the customer value proposition. And we see the same things in autonomy. For example, weather is a big factor and was a big surprise to me a year ago. Phoenix, for example, is typically above 110 degrees during the summer. Sometimes it reaches even higher than that. And in those conditions, you have to be very thoughtful about energy management in the vehicles because the batteries drain a lot faster. You also have these really odd weather events called haboobs, which are these massive rolling dust storms that just engulf the entire city. And then when that happens, you have to really ensure all the sensors, the lidars, the cameras, radars are all working properly and working at nominal. Miami, completely different set of challenges, right? Because you have now in that market hurricanes, you have tremendous rain, every day rains in Miami. And so you have to really think about how to protect the fleet against weather events like that in Miami, which is very hard given that these are all EVs vehicles. London, of course, will present its own challenges. But I think that the biggest surprise is just how truly hyper-local the operations are and how you can really tweak the system to really optimize it for ride sharing.
Haboobs, I've not heard of that before, but sounds like you guys are ready and able to operate rideshare autonomously on Arrakis in Dune in the future.
What about his? I wonder what snow's going to be like whenever that comes to pass. Do we just put studded tires on all the vehicles, or do we need an entire new vehicle in itself?
Well, we're excited to see that when it comes. But I think one thing is for certain, which is Waymo Driver will be or has already accumulated more miles underneath its belt in more diverse types of weather than any human driver. And every incremental city that they launch in, every different corner case that they experience only makes the serve the driver a lot safer over time.
Yeah, as someone who lived in Miami for quite some time, I'm excited to see how Waymo's systems are able to handle the rainy or the monsoon season coming up. I mean, you've probably got some early action indication of that here in probably June and July. But those torrential downpours that you can get in Miami are amazing. But yeah, I mean, those are situations that the autonomous vehicle industry can't shy away from, right? They need to be dealt with head on, and the only way to learn is to get out there and give it a go. And to your point earlier, I think what's incredible about your system, your platform, and also Waymo's ability to kind of recall the whole fleet for weather and reissue them back out when that ODD is safe. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, and absolutely the way I think that's probably most responsible and operationally feasible in the beginning is to just kind of adjust to the weather patterns and get a little bit of experience, but probably not too much so that you have to, face some type of shortage. But it'll be fascinating to see how the Waymos deal with the August downpours that Miami can get.
Ming, you guys are operating in a number of cities now that like it's almost, specifically Phoenix, I think, where seeing these vehicles is just a part of daily life. For the cities that have yet to have any wheels on the ground, any AV wheels on the ground, what do those cities need to do to prepare, or like what are they missing to be ready for those cities themselves to actually get lit up?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I would point to maybe two different areas that really need to be unlocked for cities to light up an AV. The first is really around curbside parking and some of the zoning considerations for that. So curbside parking is quite important because if there is not a ride, or when a vehicle is waiting for a ride, it's much more efficient to park at Waymo or a vehicle, and really wait for rider demand to come, rather than routing vehicles or having them drive around the city, waiting for demand. So I think curbside is one of those very small but also very impactful things that need to be thought through very carefully. The second I might point out too is really large event areas or large consumer areas. So think about airports, think about large mall properties, think about convention centers, sports stadiums, where the PUDOs can be quite complicated. PUDOs need to be very thoughtfully curated in order to provide the best experiences. And that just requires quite a bit of coordination with cities and city planners to make sure that customers get the best experience possible on an AV.
We're excited to work with you all on that in Phoenix, because we've got 3 of the largest shopping centers coming on board for Autolane here next week, which is exciting. And I think this will be the first city where Moove AV and Autolane will converge, which is going to be great. And we've been setting up PUDO zones for Waymos across California, Georgia, and Texas so far. And that's been really, really helpful, not just for the property owner, but for the riders to be able to know exactly where they need to go to get this. So it's similar to, the way you would pick up an Uber or Lyft at an airport. So those type of Autolane zones that we've been deploying across these major shopping centers and malls have been successful in these other states. And now we're bringing it to Phoenix and Arizona. And of course, Moove AV, as being the operator of those cars in that city, will be cool to see your cars showing up at the Autolane zones and helping Waymo riders have a much better experience. So excited for that.
Ming, what's next for Moove?
I think it's just really more of the same. We launched our Waymo fleet in Miami in January this year. It's been an amazing experience. Again, one of the largest markets on the East Coast right now. And as we continue to open new cities, I think the key is just to really understand and deeply learn how to run a fleet in a very hyper-local way to every city. And that just takes a lot of reps, a lot of time. But we're just looking forward to continuing to learn how autonomy fits in very unique ways to every city.
Fantastic. Well, we're excited to follow along. Ming, where can we find more about you and our listeners specifically find more about you and Moove?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn, email. I'm sure you can add this to the show notes afterwards, but I'm looking forward to partner with anyone who's interested in the world of autonomy. Please give us a shout out anytime you're in Phoenix.
Done deal. Awesome. Well, Ming, thanks again for coming on today. We really appreciate you. That is the pod.
Thanks, guys.